Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, committee, for your time. This is a bill that is sort of a continuation of a conversation that the voters, I would say, in a lot of ways began, and we have been a part of it in the last couple of years in implementing the will of the voters. So, by way of background, Proposition 122 was on the ballot in the last general election, and what it did was it legalized and created a regulated market for what it refers to as natural medicine. Natural medicine under the law now is substances such as psilocybin and a few other probably less common substances, but these are essentially hallucinogenic and other types of substances and drugs that have an incredible amount of value. I think a lot of people are finding through research these days for various mental health and behavioral health and other issues. Obviously, this is also these are substances that are sacred to a lot of people for a long time prior to us having this conversation in this committee room, and serve an incredibly important spiritual and religious role for a lot of indigenous folks around the world. This bill is merely a technical kind of cleanup bill, sort of a 2.0 of a bill from last year. The bill last year implemented Proposition 122. It made a series of policy decisions in that implementation. I would say this bill really doesn't make a whole lot of policy decisions, but really tries to clarify some things, fixes some oversights that we had last year, and really clarifies some of the processes now that the departments have gone through an immense amount of stakeholding and rulemaking. I suspect there will be future cleanup bills on this topic, but it is a promising and exciting realm, and I think the department and folks that have been involved, stakeholders, et cetera, have really done a great job in navigating this as best as possible, and I'm excited to be able to help and fix some of the things and make sure it continues to be successful. The bill itself, it does a few things. One of the probably most notable parts is it updates or adds some more clarity around the requirements or education requirements for facilitators, and who licenses and approves that those educational materials and curriculum. It talks about testing of these products, specifically allowing a facility that tests marijuana to also be able to test natural medicines, and then a few other things. For instance, we talked about in the bill last year, persons can only have a stake in 5 entities, and we are changing that to individuals because there's a legal distinction between persons and individuals. Persons includes entities under state law, so we're making some of those types of clarifications. So nothing major. No major departures from what was approved by voters or from what we approved last year. It really is just clarifying and fixing a few things.
Senator Michelson-Janae.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to join you on this trip. I wanted to point out one very important thing that the President left out, that we are correcting the spelling of psilocin in Titles 10, 12, 18, and 44. That spelling correction is really key, and wanted to make sure that it was pointed out. Other than that, the President really did cover all of the things that we are doing in this bill, and I ask for an aye vote.
President Fember.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to mention one last thing. I talked about how the departments and so many folks have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes with stakeholding and rulemaking. I want to call out one individual in particular, Sam Bahrami. Many of you probably have interacted with him, know him. He's been working in the executive branch for a bit now. He is moving on from his current role, and I think it's kind of an appropriate time for him to do so because he has really shepherded this process with a lot of respect in deference to the to folks who have been working in this field and have a lot to provide. He's really done an excellent job, and we wish him the best of luck. And where he's moving on to, he won't be going too far. He'll still be in the executive branch, but just wanted to give him a shout out and say how much we appreciate all of his work over the years.
Thank you. Any questions for the bill sponsors from the committee? I have one question. How did you get DORA to not have to oversee this and not have a fiscal note? Can we, use the same tactics with some others? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there was an appropriate fiscal note in the bill last year.
Mm-hmm. We are to the witness testimony. We do have 4 witnesses signed up, and we can bring them all at the same time. I have Sam Delp, Dominique, Mendiola, Allison, Robinette, and online, remotely, I have, is it Tasha? Oh boy, Tasha, you're going to pronounce your last name for me, Poisada?
Tasha, my son.
All right, thank you. And we're going to start with the first person, and we'll hold our questions till everyone testifies, but we'll start with Sam, and you have 3 minutes. Please introduce yourself and provide your testimony.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Sam Delp. I'm the Director of the Division of Professions and Occupations at DORA. As you know, in November of 2022, Colorado voters approved Proposition 122, which established the Natural Medicine Advisory Board within DORA to provide recommendations for rule promulgation to develop a regulatory framework for the Natural Medicine Access Program. Over the past year, the Natural Medicine Advisory Board, under the leadership of Sam Bahrami, as the President mentioned, has done tremendous work on the implementation of this program, conducting more than 70 public board meetings to submit regulatory recommendations to our Executive Director, Patty Salazar, and the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Revenue, Heidi Humphreys. The division is currently engaging stakeholders through the rulemaking process on licensing and education requirements for the newly created occupational license known as facilitators. Those draft rules are available to the public for review. We will hold formal rulemaking hearings in May, with additional stakeholder meetings for further draft rules on disciplinary actions and standards of practice. This bill is essential to our planned rulemaking and the continued safe implementation and regulation of natural medicine in the state of Colorado. Currently, there's no regulatory framework for natural medicine training and education programs in Colorado. These education programs are essential to providing appropriate training to help ensure potential licensees are safe and competent to practice. This bill establishes in the Division of Professions and Occupations at DORA as the regulatory authority that will review, approve, license, and if necessary, discipline training programs. With this legislation, we will be able to ensure that our licensees have received the proficient and qualified training necessary for competent practice in natural medicine. This bill also removes the requirement to petition a district court for an investigative subpoena, which is consistent with other professions regulated through DORA and DPO. This change will help prevent delayed response times in issuing disciplinary actions for violations of 170. And it'll also lower administrative costs for the program. It's my hope that the committee will recognize the need for these important changes and support this bill, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Delp. Appreciate that. We'll get to those after everyone goes through. Next, I have Dominique Mendiola. If you would introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, and you have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Chair and members of the committee. It's great to be here. My name is Dominique Mendiola. I serve as the Senior Director for the Colorado Department of Revenue's both new Natural Medicine Division as well as our Marijuana Enforcement Division. We are here to express our support for this bill. We, as was mentioned, we are actively engaging in the implementation process together, and that includes a lot of stakeholdering that has been actively underway. That involves a number of listening sessions that we have held across the state of Colorado to create awareness and be able to address questions around this new law. And we have already kicked off our rulemaking process with a lot of productive engagement with stakeholders. We are also closely coordinating with our partners at the Department of Regulatory Agencies and the Natural Medicine Advisory Board. And we appreciate this opportunity to ensure that we are engaging in this process effectively. Again, we express our support of this bill that will allow for operable implementation consistent with both the will of the voters of Colorado and the direction of the General Assembly in an effective and efficient manner. Thank you for this opportunity. We're happy to address any questions.
Thank you. Next, I have Allison Robinette. If you go ahead and introduce yourself, who you represent. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Allison Robinette. I serve as the Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs for both the Natural Medicine Division and the Marijuana Enforcement Division within the Department of Revenue. I'm here today to express my support of this bill that really does reflect clarifications outlined by President Finberg and Senator Michelson-Jeannet. This will support our effective implementation of the regulated natural medicine program within the Department of Revenue, and I'm happy to answer any questions you all have. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Tasha, if you go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for the opportunity to testify. My name is Tasha Poinsett, and I represent the Healing Advocacy Fund. I am testifying in support of this bill. The Healing Advocacy Fund is a nonprofit whose mission is to protect and expand safe, affordable, state-regulated access to psychedelic healing for all who need it. We work closely with our colleagues in Oregon to ensure that lessons learned in the first state-regulated program for psilocybin therapies can inform Colorado's process and organize expert input to support implementation of a responsible and accessible natural medicine program in Colorado. In November 2022, almost 3 million Colorado voters approved Proposition 122, directing the state to establish a regulated framework for adults 21 and over to legally access psilocybin therapy with support from licensed facilitators. This change in Colorado's law occurs at a time when our state is experiencing a mental health crisis. Too many Coloradans struggling with conditions like depression, addiction, and PTSD have been unable to find healing through currently available treatments. Rigorous medical research from institutions such as Johns Hopkins, UCLA, and NYU show that natural medicines can be a powerful tool for healing where other options have been ineffective, insufficient, or impose an unacceptable burden in the form of harmful side effects. Last year, the state legislature passed Implementation Bill 23-290. Senate Bill 24-198 is the next step in this careful implementation process, making several technical changes necessary for successful launch of the regulated psilocybin program in 2025. The changes in this bill were informed by the analysis and recommendations of the governor appointed and Senate-approved Natural Medicine Advisory Board, compiled across dozens of public meetings over the past year. I want to thank the sponsors for their work on this bill and look forward to the next steps in this process to create a safe, equitable, and accessible psilocybin therapy program for the benefit of all Coloradans. Thank you.
And thank you. And do we have any questions for this panel from our committee members? I do have a question or a couple questions, and this is to anyone who wants to raise their hand to answer it. When we're talking about approving curriculum, approving programs, where do you see these programs being held or being provided? Higher education, community college, who's going to provide these programs? Anyone? Sam.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Yes, theoretically it could be any of the above. There are some institutions that have already expressed interest in these programs, and some have already begun to develop curriculum. Naropa, for example, is one of the ones that I know of that has expressed interest in developing a program.
Do you have any examples that you can rely on? As Oregon, I know, was said that what they're doing is this from the ground up, and how do you foresee this, how long this will take to implement?
Thank you. I appreciate that question as well. So the Natural Medicine Advisory Board has established the education requirements. They're part of the draft rules. So programs are beginning to, develop their curriculum based on what those draft rules are sort of leading towards at this point. Certainly, we did look to Oregon as an example in various capacities, both things that were successful there and things that were not successful there. Our goal is to, with the passage of this bill, to begin including the draft rule and stakeholder process this summer. Next month, we'll begin with that process as well in terms of implementation, if that's what you were referencing.
Yes, thank you. Oh, and my last question is the training programs that we're talking about. I mean, specifically, I know we're at the very beginning, and it's very open-ended at this time. Are we talking about a training into the facilities? What would that training hope to do? Sorry, Ms. Mendiola, right? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So just to provide some context here, there are, when it comes to our coordination between the Department of Revenue's work, where we are responsible for licensing and regulating those operations, those facilities, whereas our partners at the Department of Regulatory Agencies are going to be licensing and regulating those facilitators, those individuals that will be engaged in providing administration services in a regulated setting. And with that, there are specific training requirements that will apply to those facilitators that work is underway and will be further fleshed out in the rulemaking process. When it comes to the work of the Department of Revenue and what we are requiring of those facilities, we are anticipating establishing requirements around things like standard operating procedures. How are we going in and assessing compliance, but also how are we proactively engaging with those who want to be a part of this regulated space and establish these operations in a successful way. So proactively engaging in compliance support will be really critical, and that's something that we will be engaging in as a part of our implementation, in addition to working with first responders across the state. That's work that we've already engaged in. We've begun by visiting various, for example, law enforcement agencies in various settings across the state to make sure that we're providing materials that are helpful to them, as they also have more awareness around these changes in the law. So that work is underway.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Senator Buckner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here today. I'm just curious, will there be any more updating of criminal provisions as we move forward? I wanted to see what your take is on that.
Would like to take that. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Robinette.
I can get us started. Thank you for the question. And I will say, for the Department of Revenue's perspective, our regulatory authority is really over those licensed facilities. So while we're working with law enforcement to help them understand the changes in the law and where we can be supportive of any investigative work they may be doing of our licensees, we are certainly interested in supporting that work, and we'll be providing regular updates, like Dominique just mentioned, as we continue to engage with law enforcement. But as far as the specific criminal provisions, that'd be outside of our authority.
Ms. Mendiola.
Yes, thank you. And just to add to what my colleague shared here, we'll also mention that under Senate Bill 290, the original legislation, as part of implementing the will of the voters, we did see in that legislation that there were areas under Title 18, so that did address offenses in a way that really very much aligns with what we see in the cannabis space around offenses. So there was an effort to really look to align those.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate you coming in. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to testify who has not signed up already? That is all for our testimony phase. Bill sponsors, would you like to, do you have any amendments? Does the committee have any amendments? The amendment phase is closed. Would you like to wrap up? President Fember.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to thank the folks who came to testify. As you can see, I think just from the handful of people that were here today, it's an incredibly professional team that has been part of implementing Proposition 122. I think we often, you joke around and have puns when we're talking about this topic and get a little silly, but it's an incredibly serious matter for a lot of people around our state. It's something that is very sacred and meaningful to a lot of people in their culture and their background and their people for a very long time. And I think the folks who've been working on implementing 122 have done it with incredible amount of respect for voters, for the people of Colorado, for folks who have been engaging in these practices for a long time, and I just really appreciate the way they've approached it. This bill, as we've discussed, really isn't making meaningful policy changes, but really is about clarifying and learning some lessons from the stakeholding that's already happened, and is about making sure that when these programs are fully off the ground, that they're done in a way that's that's responsible, that is taking care of people, that there's consumer protection, and that people get the services they need without undue barriers in the way. I do also just want to remind all of us that Proposition 122 did many things. This bill that we're talking about today is almost entirely about the regulated side. There are opportunities for folks, whether it's folks engaging in spiritual or indigenous ceremonies, or folks who are seeking assistance and help in other ways, that may not want to go through the regulated side of this new opportunity and option for folks. So all of that exists. None of this bill impedes or impacts that. This is strictly about the side of the natural medicine world that is going to be regulated and endorsed by the state of Colorado to make sure there's consumer protection, that everyone's playing by the same rules.
Senator Michelson, Janae.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again, Mr. President, and everyone who came to testify. I just want to add that I am grateful for the ongoing conversation around regulation. I think it's really important. And from a parent perspective, I see this conversation as one that unfolds at my kitchen table. So I'm grateful to be a part of this and ask for an aye vote.
Any closing comments from the committee? Senator Mulliken, will you move this bill?
I move Senate Bill 198 to the Committee of the Whole and ask for a favorable recommendation.
That's a proper motion. I just want to say one thing. I appreciate the expertise and the brevity this year of this committee. So thank you very much. Mr. Ricker, call the roll.
Senators Buckner,
Aye.
Hanson,
Aye.
Simpson,
No.
Smallwood excused, Van Winkle,
Aye.
Booker,
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. That passes 5-1, and you're off to the Committee of the Whole. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no other business for the Senate Finance Committee, and we are adjourned.
Yeah.